Hello, and welcome to this episode of Fractional Futures, where I'm joined by Dan Gwalter, an executive coach and founder of No Nonsense Leadership. Hi, Dan. How have you been since last time?
Hey, Mo. Yeah, we're in the middle of summer holidays now, so house for the kids, really putting to the test what working from home is all about. What about yourself?
Yes, we've got a house full today. My partner's boy's got his friend over all week, so I've told them to go to the beach this morning, so we record this podcast without any noisy distractions. For those of you tuning in for the first time, in our last episode, we explored how fractional CMOs need to establish a blueprint to win and manage clients. In this episode, we're going to be focusing on how fractional CMOs can go about becoming what we call a trusted advisor, how to be completely indispensable so you maintain those long-term client relationships. Today, we'll be covering the role of trusted advisor. We'll be looking at how you can build an advisor-level relationship and also how you maintain status as that trusted advisor. So, Dan, I've been in professional services for the last 10, 15 years of my senior marketing career. And for people like lawyers, accountants, financial planners, they often use the badge trusted advisor. Now, most marketers wouldn't even label themselves as this. But when you're migrating from a corporate role into the fractional role, that trusted advisor badge becomes a bit more important. So in your eyes, what does trusted advisor mean? And when you coach executives, how do you coach the mindset of going from a provider to an advisor?
It's a really cool point. I think if I look back, the term fractionals is still relatively immature. It's still relatively new, certainly in the UK. For our global audience, obviously the US has had it for quite a while, and it seems to be much more established. Before that, we had portfolio. But again, there was more of an execution focus in those roles. You're going into organizations to do something that they need doing. I think that's all of the sort of the transition from employee into consultant, into fractional. Working about advisor, I think the consultancies get this right, and they always have done. The consultancies worked out quite early doors that if you're in some form of professional service where you're doing some form of delivery, so I take technology as an example, consultancies partner up with big software manufacturers and they act as their sort of implementation arm. And so the consultants in those consultancies are spending a healthy amount of their time just delivering that service. But it's kind of once and done. It doesn't create long-term value for the consultancy. So the consultancies woke up probably 20 years ago and determined that actually, if you want to create recurring revenue, then you've got to do things slightly differently. You have two choices. You can either become a service side of the equation where you look after what you build, or you can become the advisory side of the service, or the advisory side of the consultancy, where you're retained primarily for your high level expertise. I think I'll say your counsel on it. I think the two sides of the equation are fundamentally different in terms of the stage at which you can pitch those services versus the things that you'll actually be doing in the mindset that you need.
Absolutely. And I think, when I practice as a fractional CMO, I like to use that badge. I'm your trusted advisor. I'm your marketing advisor. I'm here to share my expertise across multiple marketing disciplines that you can leverage to grow your business faster or more sustainably. Certainly from the feedback I get from my clients, they like that advisory piece. They say, we're being advised by a marketing expert here. I think there is a very subtle difference between positioning yourself as that consultant and an advisor. But for me personally, it feels that there's more weight in that trusted advisor badge than maybe consultant. But that's just what I'm seeing and hearing.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. There is certainly more weight when you position yourself as an advisor. The only thing that I would say is that until you've built a reputation as an advisor, this comes back down to that whole piece around social proof and around brand positioning, is if you don't have the brand that is you're an advisor first, and you don't have a great wealth of social proof, like testimonials, case studies, and that type of stuff, or even referrals, then it can be incredibly challenging to try and sell yourself as an advisor, as a trusted advisor. What we're really saying is that you're the best of the best of the best in that particular scenario. And so what I see very, very commonly in the fractional market is that there is a journey to get there for each client. You may start off very much in the execution phase of it. So you'll do some discovery work, you'll agree on some outcomes that you're going to deliver, and you deliver those outcomes. But those are very, very discrete statements of work, probably fixed price, fixed term. And whilst they're great, they don't actually get you to a position where you're creating that elusive, monthly recurring revenue. The transitional path, therefore, is, well, I've done this now. I've proven my credibility. I've proven my worth. You've had more airtime with the clients. You're able to build that relationship, build up trust. And at that point, you can probably get away with pitching some form of retained service on an ongoing basis. And as long as you are crystal clear on where you draw the boundaries on that, then you can create a healthy portfolio of clients who are retained, paying you a monthly amount because you're seen as a trusted advisor.
And I think that leads in as a perfect segue really to this next piece around building that advisor level relationship. And I think you're totally right, Dan. I think when you win a client, there is a scope of work that they want, a project they want delivered, and it might be over 6 months, 9 months. Could be a new market entry. It might be a rebrand. It might be a digital transformation piece. I think once you've gone beyond those tactical projects, it's what next? Well, we can, as your advisor, we can be here to help you point your strategic decision making in the right direction. We can guide you through the business planning process to get your business to where it needs to be. So getting to that point, what are the most effective techniques for doing?
I think, from my own experience, the organizations that I've served an advisory purpose for, I've been able to get in there and build that relationship over a period of time. It definitely didn't happen overnight. I definitely didn't walk in there on day one and say, hey, look, I'll be your CTO advisor, your technology advisor. It happened because of other things that I was already doing for them. And the fact that those things presented opportunity for me to talk to the right people about the bigger picture. And that's where that journey begins, is when you get in front of people and you're able to talk about their strategy, their goals, their challenges, their pains, their problems, and you're able to articulate, if it were me, this is how I would approach that, and this is what I would ultimately do. That then starts to sort of quite subliminally position you as that advisor already. And I guess to some extent, the way the world has changed over the last, 5 or 6 years has really paused what we're now seeing in terms of that advisor status and how you achieve it. What used to happen was you used to go out to lunch with CEOs, which gave you that opportunity to have decent conversations about what was really going on and how they could get through those challenge points, or how they could remove those pains. That doesn't happen so much. Now those relationships, those CEO type relationships, are built based on the things that you're in there doing. And that's, to a certain extent, that's a great opportunity for the increase in those sort of diagnostic products and increasing the sort of discrete statement of work-based products, because whilst they do definitely deliver a good outcome for the client, what they deliver for the consultant is an opportunity to build relationship. And so for me, that's the biggest transitional point I overcome, is to get out of execution mode and start to build trust, start to build that relationship, so that people automatically start to perceive you as the advisor.
You're right. And I think there's another consideration here, which is the level of integration that you as a fractional executive, it doesn't have to be a marketer, it can be the CFO or whatever fractional flavor executive you are. the more integrated you get into the business, the more value you can offer, because you're having those conversations, you're talking to other functions, you're talking to other subject matter experts in the business, you're seeing different views and perspectives of that business. There's a client I've been just started working with, and initially I've been brought in to just deliver a scope of work to put all the foundational marketing pieces together. I was having a conversation with one of their young advisors, and he's just been given a project to get the brand onto a platform as a lead generation device. And just by having a couple of conversations with this guy, I could straight away see some red flags with this platform. I don't think the platform's necessarily suitable for the client, and they're investing quite heavily in this platform. So straight away, I could have an off the record conversation with the CEO. I said, are you really aware of what this platform is? Do you understand how it works from a marketing perspective? And did you know that you have to put a lot more money in it to get the level of leads that you're expecting? And he wasn't even aware of this. So just by getting involved with a side conversation can open up something much more valuable for the business. And that could save them several £1,000s a month just on wasted advertising costs.
Yeah, I think my favourite example of this, obviously I'm a fractional CTO by trade. I've been doing this for a long time. My favourite example is I have an organisation that are financial services based. I've worked with them on and off probably about 6 years now, through various activities that they need to be delivered that they haven't had the internal skills to do. I've built a very good relationship with the CEO and the finance director. The beginning of the advisory journey with them started while I was delivering something. And I found myself in a position where I was doing those sort of daily check-in calls with the CEO. He used to ring me for the car on his way back home. He had an hour and a half commute every day. So he'd ring me, you could almost set your watch by him, 6:30, he'd ring. And it would just turn into a bit of a brain dump as to what had gone on in the day, the challenges that he was facing, the business was facing. And a lot of the time, I'd be sat there with a headset, just having a conversation, just chatting away. That, over the course of 3 or 4 months, became a retained advisory service. And it wasn't, when I first did it, I didn't see it coming, I didn't expect it, and I definitely wasn't even looking for it. I think I was locked in execution mode. But it certainly became the retained service that I probably should have gone for a lot earlier. So what did that look like? Well, in the first instance, it was exactly that. If the CEO wanted to have a chat about what was going on and, just seek opinion, validate thinking, then I was there for it all the time. Over a very short period of time, that became, can you attend our leadership meetings? Can you attend our strategy planning sessions? Can you attend our board meetings? And can you represent technology at those sessions and really be the sort of independent expert in the corner that can sort of lean into conversation and go, I wouldn't do that if I was you, or maybe you're better off focusing over here. And so by the end of year 1, I really kind of built an advisory model for that particular client that worked well, ticked all of their boxes, gave them exactly what they needed, and paid me income as well. So that's the sort of example that I go back to time and time again, because once I learned it, I was able to repeat that with other clients that maybe weren't even thinking about advisory services when I first engaged with them. I certainly developed a method of being able to know, well, actually, this is execution, and now we transition to advisory. This is what you get.
And it's probably quite hard for people coming into this fractional world to actually package that up as a service. You're talking about it as it is now. You think, oh, okay, I'll just offer so many hours or so many days of my time, most of that advisory piece, and that's that. But a lot of these conversations in your example, that would be kind of serendipity, and you just so happen to have a coffee meeting or something with someone quite critical in the business, and that conversation led to something else. And that kind of serendipity moment is hard to package up, but it's definitely worth having it at the back of your mind when you're thinking about positioning yourself as a fractional executive.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, for anybody listening in that's considering going down the advisory route, my first piece of advice is please do not price this on a per hour basis. For 2 reasons. Firstly, it creates your sales team You've immediately set your maximum earning potential with that. Secondly, it just doesn't work. The whole concept of being the trusted advisor, the key word in that sentence is trusted. And so I would look at it very much as a fixed price per month with an agreed number of deliverables, the agreed number of things you're going to do. And then you've got to work with your gut instinct. Is this client going to really leverage against that contract and take up an inordinate amount of time? If so, then price it higher. Are they going to have a sort of ramp where they use you for a lot for the first couple of months and then it just tails off into a steady state? And at which point you can space that cost out over the entire year without overburdening the client pricing up front and potentially risking not winning the business in the first place. So for me, I strongly advise just avoid the hourly rate model, because when you do, it makes clients very, very nervous. If you're going to sell me 10 hours per month at X, what happens when I use 12? What happens if I only use 4 hours in 1 month, but I use 9 in the next? Do I get overcharged for the overuse and I lose money on the unused? And you can really wrap yourself up in some horrid complexity trying to formulaically work your way out of that position. So for me, set a price threshold, work with the client. If the client is overusing your service, i.e. they're getting a lot more value than they're paying for, then over a period of time, that's a topic for conversation. And it's much better to do it that way than it is to try and bundle yourself up in a horrid commercial model that nobody wants. What's your thoughts on that, Paul?
Yeah, well, having spent several years working in law firms, I totally agree with everything you've just said. Law firms work on the billable hour. Every 6 minutes, the price goes up. And the amount of objections that causes, that uncertainty of how much are you going to charge me? Are you going to undercharge? Are you going to overcharge? Everything you just mentioned becomes valuable. I think what you want to do is remove those objections away from your client.
You hit the nail on the head very early in that little segment. If you look at the legal model and that sort of cost per minute, cost per hour, if you look at the behaviour that creates in the client, I've worked with legal teams, I've worked with solicitors both personally and professionally. You always have that feeling of you're on the clock. So you downsize the amount of narrative, you downsize the amount of engagement, you give a minimum amount of information and you hope for the best. In a true advisory relationship, that's the worst possible outcome you can create, is if the client's reluctant to speak to you for a period of time because they think they're going to get charged for it, or if they're reluctant to engage in full detail because you may well put a service charge on top of it, then you're not going to get that advisory status. You've just become a service provider. And that's the wrong approach.
That's probably a good point to close this show, Dan. If you've been listening or watching this episode, and I hope you find value from what we've been discussing, and you take what you've learned today into the next part of your fractional career. In our next episode, we'll be discussing the different strategies fractional marketers can apply to expand their client portfolio. So Dan, thank you again. It's been a great show. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for your nuggets of wisdom there, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait. Thanks.